Welcome back to Pauline's Pop Culture Corner. I'm Pauline, and I am super excited to be back with you talking about one of my favorite times of year, spooky season. So as soon as October 1st hits, I'm all about watching all of my favorite movies, short movies, skits that have to do with Halloween. And today I wanted to talk to you guys about some of my favorite cozy Halloween movies and skits and short films. These are the movies that are family friendly and aren't scary, but kind of have like a spookiness about them or are kind of supernatural and fun. So go ahead and like the video, subscribe, comment down below, and don't forget to go over and join me on Instagram at Pauline's Pop Culture Corner. Anyways, let's get started with the list. The first movie on my list is literally one of my favorite movies of all time. Not even just a Halloween movie, just in general. And it's the movie Clue. It came out in 1985 and it was based on a board game by the same name, which I played all the time as a kid. And the board game is a murder mystery game where you have to try to figure out who done it, with what weapon, and in what room. The movie, starring an all-star cast with Tim Curry as Tim Wadsworth, Miss Scarlett is played by Leslie Ann Warren, Michael McKean is Mr. Green, we've got Martin Mull as Colonel Mustard, Professor Plum is played by Christopher Lloyd, Madeline Kahn is Mrs. White, we've got Eileen Brennan as Mrs. Peacock. I mean, it's just an all-star cast. Anyways, all of these characters back in the 50s are being blackmailed by some unknown blackmailer. And they've been summoned to this spooky manor, and they're going to finally meet their blackmailer and figure out what's going on. Well, during the course of the evening, guess what? There's some murders. And so they have to figure out who the murderer is, what the motive is, what's going on, right? Now, I don't want to give away the ingenious way that they kind of filmed the ending, but it was definitely ahead of its time, which meant that it didn't do great at the box office, but definitely became a cult classic later. Now, the first time I ever saw the movie was when I was in high school, and I was invited by a friend of mine for a Halloween party where it was a murder mystery dinner party. And we were all given our characters, and I played, I believe it was Mrs. White. And during the course of the evening, just kind of like in the movie, there were murders, we had to solve them, and it was so much fun. Probably one of the most fun Halloween parties I've ever been to. At the end of the night, we sat down and watched the movie because, of course, it was the perfect tie-in, and I fell in love. And I watched this movie not just at Halloween time, but throughout the years. So if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend you check it out. Like I said, all-star cast, great acting, really funny, love that movie. Now the next movie, if you grew up in America, you've like 99% sure you've seen this movie. And it's a short animated classic. It's The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. It came out in 1966 and it's based on the characters created by Charles Schulz, the Peanuts gang. And it follows most of the gang, including Charlie Brown, Lucy, all of those folks, Pigpen, Franklin, as they go trick-or-treating, and poor Charlie Brown gets rocks in his trick-or-treat bag, which I never understood why people treated him so horribly, but that's for a different time. And Linus and Charlie Brown's younger sister, Sally, sit in a pumpkin patch all night waiting for the Great Pumpkin, who, spoiler alert for a 50-something-year-old movie, he never shows up. But in the middle of all this, we've got Snoopy and Woodstock going on their adventures, and it's just a great family tradition. I'm pretty sure you've all seen it, but if you haven't, definitely check it out. Next movie on my list is another cult classic starring Tim Curry, and it's Rocky Horror Picture Show. Came out in 1975, and it was based on a stage play of the same name. It stars Tim Curry, Susan Sarandon, and Barry Bostwick, and it's just a campy, cheesy, fun movie with lots of dressing up and songs. It's eminently singable. I mean, to the point where there's this huge fan culture that goes along with it. There are still theaters that show it today, and the fans show up in costume, they sing along with the songs, they recite the lines, they act out scenes, they throw rice at the wedding scene. If you haven't gone to the theater to see Rocky Horror Picture Show, you definitely have to. I mean, watching it at home or with friends is fun too, but definitely the theater is a different experience. Lots of fun, recommend. The next movie on the list is Practical Magic, and it came out in 1998, starring Nicole Kidman, Sandra Bullock, Jane Weiss, Stockard Channing, Aidan Quinn, and a young Evan Rachel Wood as Sandra Bullock's older daughter. Now, this movie is definitely kind of like what I consider a cozy Halloween movie. It's romantic, it's funny, and it's a little poignant and sad. And it also holds a pretty significant place in my heart because it was one of the very first movies I ever saw in the theater with my husband when we first started dating. So whenever I see it on TV, I definitely have to stop and watch it. So, What We Do in the Shadows is a movie that came out in 2014, and I cannot believe that I literally just watched it a few weeks ago. It's now one of my favorite movies. It's got Taika Waititi in it, which I love just about everything I've ever seen him in or ever seen that he's directed. He's great. And the movie itself is hilarious. It's a mockumentary following around 4 vampire flatmates in New Zealand trying to navigate the 21st century when one of the flatmates accidentally creates a new vampire and they have to adjust to that. And then they're also dealing with the local werewolf pack. They have to deal with, other supernatural beings. It's just so funny. I laughed from beginning to end. And I just recently realized or found out that there's a TV show based on the movie on FX, which I definitely want to check out. If you're into really funny kind of like satire or anything like that, it's really great. Give it a watch. Like I said, I kind of feel like I missed the boat on that one early on, but now I definitely am recommending it to anyone who likes Halloween movies. So for people of my generation, the next movie is a nostalgia and just good feel type movie. It's Hocus Pocus. It came out in 1993, and it stars Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, Kathy Najimy, and Omri Katz. Omri Katz is the main protagonist of the movie, and it's the story of the 3 Sanderson sisters who were witches back in the 1600s and got dealt with by the townspeople, and they basically were imprisoned in their home until a black candle was lit by a virgin, and that would bring them back. Well, Max, played by Omri Katz, doesn't believe the legend, and he and his little sister and his love interest, I think her name is Allison, they go into the Sanderson home. He lights the candle, and being a virgin, brings back the Sanderson sisters. Now, they don't want to have happen what happened before, so they spend the rest of the movie trying to find children to eat before the sun comes up so that they can be immortal. And of course, Max and his sister and Allison and a talking cat named Binks do everything in their power to keep the Sandersons from getting those children and becoming immortal. I don't want to spoil anything. I know you've all probably seen it, but I'm not going to tell you the ending. It's a great movie. It's lots of fun. It kind of hits all the notes of being, having the Halloween fun element, being really funny in its own right. Great acting, great storytelling. And it's one that I know that, like I said, everyone I know, when this time of year rolls around, they sit down and watch it. So the next movie on my list is Ichabod Crane and Mr. Toad. And I'm only going to be talking about the Ichabod Crane part because that's the Halloween part. And it's the retelling of the story of Sleepy Hollow and the Headless Horseman by Washington Irving. The whole thing is narrated and voiced by Bing Crosby, has a lot of really great songs to sing along with, and it basically kind of looks at what might have actually happened all those decades ago when Ichabod Crane disappeared. This is a family favorite for us. My daughter always loved it growing up, and it's one of the first things that we watch when it hits October 1st. And that's the case with the next movie, which is really more of just a short little song and dance. And it's the Skeleton Dance by Silly Symphony that came out in 1929. It's a black and white short that is entirely musical, and it's basically what might happen at midnight in a cemetery. And it shows skeletons dancing, black cats, owls, and it's just a really fun little short thing to watch to get you in the mood for spooky season. So right now I've noticed there's a lot of nostalgia for the 1980s. And the next short Halloween special on my list is Garfield's Halloween special that came out in 1985. And it's definitely a throwback to, well, not a throwback. It definitely gives good nostalgia for those of us who grew up as kids in the 80s and what Halloween really was like. You know, making costumes out of just whatever you might have around the house. You know, unless you were lucky enough to get one of those costumes from the drugstore that was like the thin, sticky plastic and the plastic mask that, you know, didn't really let you breathe or see very well. And if you were He-Man or Wonder Woman in the 80s, you likely had one of those costumes. In the Halloween special, Garfield and Odie decide to dress up as pirates and go out trick-or-treating so Garfield can get his fill of candy. What they didn't count on was running into actual pirate ghosts. So they have a fun time for us and a scary time for them trying to get away from the ghosts, only to find that their boat full of candy is gone. Where's their candy? So they start making their way back home and actually find their boat, make it back to the house, and all is good. It's a great nostalgic trip if you were a kid of the 80s, you know, and you remember roaming the neighborhood with your biggest pillowcase, trying to find as much candy as you could while still keeping your eyes out for ghosts, spooks, and goblins. So just about everyone knows who David S. Pumpkins is now, but that wasn't the case in 2016. This Saturday Night Live skit introduced us to David S. Pumpkins, played by Tom Hanks, with his two bebop boy skeleton friends. And they are in a haunted elevator attraction. Now, rightfully, the patrons of this attraction are really confused. Who's David S. Pumpkins? Why is he here? Is he supposed to be scary? And he just keeps showing up with his bebop boys, singing his little song and doing his little dance until the very end when he actually does get to scare them. It's so fun and funny. We watch it every year, and they actually did make a animated short because of how much people enjoyed it. So if you haven't seen the animated short, I believe it's here on YouTube. Go ahead and check it out. It's really fun. So if we're all honest with ourselves, those of us who lived through the 1980s know that it was the decade of Michael Jackson. And the fact that he put out a Halloween song and video in Thriller was just amazing. So the video came out and it was different than anything we had ever seen before as far as music videos. It had a world premiere on MTV, and rather than being a typical music video, it was actually a short horror film. It was directed by John Landis, and of course the choreography and the music and everything was by Michael Jackson, and the special effects were just amazing. It was really a mini movie. John Landis had previously directed American Werewolf in London, so he kind of used some of those same techniques on the Thriller music video. Now, the crazy thing about the video is that it's from the time before CGI, and so all of the effects were practical effects. Michael turning into a werewolf, Michael being a zombie, all of the rest of the zombies, it was all practical effects with special effects makeup. And it still holds up. You watch it now and it's just as good as it was, 30 some years ago. And I, as a kid, when I first saw it, I was really freaked out by it. I was scared of it. I didn't understand what happened to Michael Jackson, all that stuff. I mean, I was really, really little. But then I was able to watch the behind the scenes documentary, which is I think maybe a half-hour documentary, and seeing what they did as far as the applying of the makeup and all of that, it kind of, it sparked my interest in that kind of, makeup and effects and everything like that. And it also kind of took some of that scariness away because I saw how they made it happen. But it's definitely, the song Our House is on rotation on our Halloween playlist. The video I love watching every year. And then sometimes I'll even look up on YouTube the documentary and watch it just because it's fascinating to see the interviews and see the process. So if you haven't seen the behind the scenes on Thriller, definitely give that a watch. It's worth your, half hour or whatnot. So just about everyone knows who the ghost with the most is. And in 1988, we were introduced to Beetlejuice. This movie starred Gina Davis, Alec Baldwin, Winona Ryder, and, of course, Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice, among other fabulous actors. And it was the movie of basically how to cope with the afterlife when you're the recently deceased. What happens to you, what should you avoid, but all done in a really fun way. And to me, the main message of the movie is it's okay to be different, whether you're alive or you're dead. It's a really funny movie, and everyone in it is great. And it was so well received that they actually had a long running cartoon on it based on Beetlejuice, and Winona Ryder, who was also in the movie, she played Lydia. So the cartoon was based on the two of those characters. I'm pretty sure most of you have watched it, but if you haven't, or if you have younger kids who haven't watched it, it's a great family movie. Some of it can be a little raunchy there in the middle with Beetlejuice's character, but that's up to you as far as kids watching it. My daughter watched it, and most of those jokes just went over her head, so it was no big deal. So one of my favorite Halloween families is the Addams Family. This is a family that it was created by Charles Addams in his cartoons, and then there was a TV show in the 60s, and in 1991 they came out with a feature film. And this film starred Raul Julia as Gomez, Angelica Houston as Morticia, Christopher Lloyd as Uncle Fester, and then we had Christina Ricci as Little Wednesday. And this movie basically is the story of this macabre but loving family, and the fact that their Uncle Fester has been missing for so long and shows back up, and they embrace him while there's still some question of whether or not this is really Uncle Fester. And I know it's a 30-year-old movie, but I don't want to give away any spoilers if you haven't seen it. But it's just a really fun movie, and like I said, they're dark, they have a dark humor, but they're a loving and functional family despite all of that. The movie did so well that they made a movie a few years later because the first one was so successful, called Addams Family Values. Then a few years ago there was an animated feature film, and I believe right now there's a sequel to the animated film. So the Addams Family has been going strong since at least the 60s. So I will say that I did not grow up with Goosebumps books because I was a little bit older when they became really popular. But when the movie came out in 2015, my daughter was about 5 years old, and we were looking to go see a movie, and this one looked really good. It had Jack Black in it. I love Jack Black. And when we went and saw it, we just had a really good time. I mean, there's humor, there's action, there's monsters. What more could you ask for? She really liked it, and we all liked it so much that we ended up buying the Blu-ray, actually. And they did make a sequel. The sequel is pretty good too, and also stars Jack Black, but the first one is really, to me, is a lot better. Of the two, that's the one that I would recommend for you guys. In 1984, we met 4 of our favorite paranormal investigators in Ghostbusters. Now we have in this movie some of the best actors of the time. We have Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, Ernie Hudson, Sigourney Weaver, Rick Moranis, and Annie Potts. Now, the 4 main characters are paranormal investigators in New York City, and they are learning the ropes and how to deal with all of these supernatural things happening in the city. It's a comedy that entertains every time I watch it, and it definitely holds up. The effects are still just as good today as they were back then, and I just love the movie. And I personally, and I know I might get some flack for this in the comments, but I personally am looking forward to the new Ghostbusters movie that's coming out with Finn Wolfhard and Paul Rudd. It's kind of like what happened in the interim with Egon's family. And so I'm kind of looking forward to seeing that. The effects look pretty good. It looks like there's going to be some good jokes. We'll see how it goes. Before Shaun of the Dead coming out in 2004, a phrase I never thought I'd say is zombie comedy. But that's exactly what it is. So in Shaun of the Dead, we have Simon Pegg playing Shaun, who is just oblivious. Outside of his, dead-end job, failed relationship, dealing with his immature friend Ed, who's played by his real-life friend Nick Frost, he has no clue that the world has gone crazy. The dead don't stay dead. If you get bitten, you become a zombie. He just has no idea until it's almost too late. So at that point, his brilliant idea is to gather all his loved ones up and try to make it across town to his favorite pub, the Winchester, because it's the only place that he knows of that has a gun. It's Britain. They don't have guns like we do here in America. As they make their way to the Winchester, unfortunately, different members of his group do start getting picked off, but they keep the humor going throughout the whole thing, and it kind of makes you wonder what you would do in that situation. I know everyone thinks that they'll be a badass and they'll be the one that, survives and thrives in a zombie apocalypse. But let's be honest, most of us would be part of the horde, brains, wandering around, right? So it kind of, even though he kind of makes it to the end, you see how it could have gone wrong so many times. And I just love the movie. And it definitely was a different take. It definitely was a different take on the genre, which was mostly very serious before that with the George A. Romero movies and things like that. Zombie movies tend, at least to me, to be a bit depressing because they're usually a commentary on something going on in society or the breakdown of society. With Shaun of the Dead, you had that, but you also had kind of the funny bits of it, like the zombie who kept trying to still play soccer because that's what he did before he got bitten. People like having some sort of strange memory residue going on, still trying to live their lives, but now they're zombies. Anyways, if you haven't seen it, it's funny. Go watch it. One of my favorite actors is Michael J. Fox, and in 1996 he brought us the movie The Frighteners. It's a movie directed by Peter Jackson, and in my opinion is really pretty underrated. Michael J. Fox plays a former architect, Frank Bannister, who now, due to an accident that he had, can see spirits. And he has kind of fashioned himself as an evil spirit exorcist. At this point, at the beginning of the film, he doesn't really exorcise evil spirits. He has some friendly ghosts that help him create hauntings so that he can come in and fix them and then get paid. But what he didn't count on was a serial killer making its way through his small town. So he, along with a love interest and the friendly ghosts, are trying to protect the town and stop the serial killer. There are some funny parts to the movie. It is a little bit more serious than most of the movies on this list, but not in a bad way. And I really, like I said, I really think it's an underrated movie. If you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out. One of my favorite people in entertainment of all time has got to be Mel Brooks. And in 1974, he brought us his comedic masterpiece, Young Frankenstein. So the movie is about Frederick Frankenstein, the grandson of Dr. Frankenstein, played by Gene Wilder, making his way back to his ancestral home and becoming slowly obsessed with his ancestors' work on bringing the dead back to life. The cast is great. His fiancée is Elizabeth is played by Madeline Kahn. Lab assistant is played by Terry Garr. We've got a wonderful performance from Marty Feldman as Igor. And then we also have Cloris Leachman as Frau Blucher, of course. Peter Boyle of Everybody Loves Raymond fame played the monster and played him really funny, but also very relatable in his wanting to belong. And there's a bit of song and dance. There's, of course, comedy. I mean, it's just a great movie. I love it. What more can you say about a Mel Brooks movie? It's as close to me to perfection as a comedy can get, I guess I would say. The last movie on the list is on here, not because it's one of my favorites, but because it's one of my husband's favorites. So in 1991, the great actor Jim Varney brought us Ernest Scared Stupid. So the movie follows the Ernest P. Worrell character as he tries to rectify bringing back to life a evil troll that he brought back to life by accident during his duties as a garbage man in a small town. He has to team up with Old Lady Hackmore, played by Eartha Kitt, who we all love, and they work together to contain him. Like all Ernest movies, it's silly. It's kind of one of those turn off your brain movies. It can be funny at times. And You don't really have to think about the story or the plot. You just laugh along at all the antics. So these were some of my favorite cozy Halloween movies. Make sure you comment down below all the ones that you like, all the ones you didn't, the ones that I've missed, because I could really use some new suggestions. Now, most of these movies on the list are my family's traditional watches, but we're always willing to look at something new to add to the list, like I did with What We Do in the Shadows. It made it into the top 20. I just love this season. I love being in the spirit, and I love the nostalgia that for me comes with Halloween. Remembering about Halloween's past, not just me as a kid, but my daughter when she was younger, and making really good memories to go forward. Be sure to go ahead and like the video, subscribe, ring the bell, and join me over on Instagram, like I said before, at Pauline's Pop Culture Corner. Take care, and I'll see you next time.